Guys, Mr. Ridgway here, and we are going to be actually doing a pre-recording of this particular lesson for Challenging China and Jaded Japan. The reason why I'm doing this is there's a lot of flexibility in this particular lesson about how you go about it. And so with that in mind, I thought that a pre-recording would probably be better. So number one, there are your warm-up questions right there. Please go ahead and get those done. And again, just as always, if I'm going too fast, you need me to slow down, please go ahead and feel like, you can pause it at any time, take your time with it. Let's continue on, shall we? So before you get into our lesson, first of all, make a copy of the notes at the link. And then I'd like you to watch both videos of Japan and China. Now, just for warning, these are very, very fast. And so I want you to be listening just for, big keywords and things like that grab your attention. And once you're done with that, you can go on with me. So here's our objectives for this lesson. Number one, we want to understand the relationship between China or Japan and Europe in the 19th century. And then compare and contrast their response to basically people like the United States and Britain and other countries. So we're going to be kind of looking at how those relationships kind of play out. And then, eventually we'll get to the point where we pick one and we kind of like, oh, they had a very unique response compared to them. So let's do it with China and Japan. Okay. First things first, there's going to be a very, very short reading / video. And right now I want you to pick a country, China or Japan. It doesn't matter which one you pick. You're going to get the same, we're going to hit the same objective no matter way. But you're going to click on number 1 and number 2 for that particular video or for that particular country. Then when you do that, okay, on the bottom of your notes, so I'm going to go ahead and open these up just so you can see, and on the very, very bottom of your notes, there is going to be an area right down here at the very, very bottom, and you're going to do this part before the mini lesson. So I'm talking about this left-hand side. So you're going to do China and Japan's relationship with the West at first. It depends on which one you do, right? So I'll put in a nice blank here, my country, and then you can write down which one you do. Once you do that, then you just summarize it. Keep it simple. Help us understand what their relationship is like for the early parts that they encounter Europeans, and I will go ahead and change this one as well. Cool. So there you go. Pretty straightforward on that. I don't think we need to get into too much depth about doing the summary. What you're doing here is you're just using these sources just to be specific and detailed. You're not doing the right hand side. You're going to do that after the mini lesson. Okay. So again, pause it, take time to read, watch the videos, etc., and then summarize there on the bottom of your notes. Let's see. I think. With that being said, we are ready to start our mini lesson. So grab the note outline if you haven't. Let's do it. So imagine if the world were confronted by the discovery of aliens. Assume they're intelligent. Would it be better for us to isolate ourselves or open up to them? No right answer with that one. Like many European countries, yes, Britain and India. We just talked about them, right? You're going to see that there's a kind of a similar kind of response that Britain has with China. So let's talk about what the British are up to. Of course, it is always no good, right? They want exotic Chinese goods, so like tea, silk, porcelain, spices, the typical European things, right? The problem is, and you should have seen this in your reading, is that there's only one thing, well, really two things that China wants back, and that's gold and silver. They won't accept payment in anything else. And this is a problem for Britain because eventually this causes a trade deficit. Like, basically, Europeans, Britain in this case, are spending more on those items than they are actually getting value in return. Okay, what a trade deficit is, just real simply, is when you are importing more than you're exporting. So you're losing money. Okay, and for Britain being like, dang, like China won't accept anything except silver and gold. They're like, crap, we got to come up with a solution. And here's the solution they come up with. They take from their colony over in India. They are like, okay, do you guys have anything that the Chinese would possibly want? And China's like, no, we don't want anything. No, we don't want anything. And they go to the British East India Company, which is their company in India, and they come back with an idea. And it is addict China to opium. Okay. And gradually, the idea is as China gets more and more and more addicted to opium, the British will get their silver back. And indeed, they will. The British Empire goes on to become the greatest drug lords in all of world history, which is crazy. Okay, and if you don't understand what opium is kind of like an older, it's still around in modern day form. Heroin, many pain pills are opiates. Okay, you might have heard that word before. Where opium comes from is from the seed of the poppy plant, and then it kind of gets refined down, and that's what the British dump into China. And when I mean dump, I mean actually physically dump, like boxes and boxes and boxes. Now, China tries to stop it. They confiscate opium shipments, they dump it into the ocean, and eventually this causes a series of wars called the Opium Wars. There's actually more than one. Basically, the British get really angry that the Chinese don't want the Chinese officials don't want their people addicted to opium. And what happens out of all this actually is that out of all the opium wars is that not only is China kept open for trade, but Britain gets the island of Hong Kong, which they will only give back to China technically in 1997. So that is like a crazy long time. They are holding on to that little city there that's kind of on its on its own on the south of China. So there you go. Now, what I'd like you to do is take a moment on your notes. Can you connect the Opium Wars to the philosophy of mercantilism? So kind of go back, recycle that knowledge, right, and think about what you can do there. All right, going on. Okay, there's one more thing I want to mention with China that's very illustrative about its relationship with the West before we go on and talk about Japan. And we have to talk about the Boxers. You're like, people boxing? No. The Boxers were a group in China. Their real name is, I believe it's the Righteous and Harmonious Fists. But in the West, they get nicknamed the Boxers for that. What this group is about is kind of complicated. The Boxers were basically an anti-imperialism, anti-Western group. They were very, very nationalistic. So, like, they wanted China to be restored to, to the Chinese. And so what happens is that the Boxer Rebellion occurs. It's this big event. They go around, they basically attack like anything that would be Western. So Christianity, even their own people who had converted to Christianity. They go and attack, different, buildings and people that, for example, like embassies and those kind of things. And basically what happens is that a whole bunch of countries jump into this and shut the Boxer Rebellion down. You can see there are 19,000 troops from Britain, Russia, Germany, Japan, Austria, Italy, and the United States. So all of a sudden, the entire world just bullies China. And it's a very, very similar result to the Opium War before. What this is called, where China is forced to be open for business, is called the open door policy. And you mean like open for business, like they are forced to trade with the outside world, whether China likes it or not. And this is probably the earliest kind of major, economic ties between the United States and China. So that's a really, really important thing because the United States and China have a very, very synergistic in many ways economic relationship going on right now. So what I want you to do is, before we go on, take a moment, come up with your own 8-word summary of how China responded to Western pressure. Okay? All right. So let's talk about Japan. Japan is a little bit more straightforward in some ways, because they have a very unusual kind of path that they go through. So Japan had actually been trading with the West for a long time. Guns, modern sciences, especially the Dutch in particular, British missionaries, and I think they mentioned Xavier and others come to Japan, and maybe that's China. Maybe I'm getting my missionaries, confused. But I mean, there's a lot of people in Japan that do convert to Christianity. The thing is, though, is that Japan's going to make a very, very different choice. So who was the real and the fake ruler in charge of Japan? A good question for you to think about going on. If you remember, it is not the real one is not the person you'd expect, and the fake one is not the person you'd expect. So I'll give you a hint. It has to do with shogun and emperor. Who's who? Emperor, shogun. I'll let you do a little bit of recall there. So let's talk about what happens. Okay, right when Japan is really ramping up its contacts with the West, the Tokugawa shogunate arrives. Okay, so if you said Shogun was the real ruler, you are right. Okay, it's led by this guy Tokugawa Ieyasu, and you can see him right there sitting down. And basically what happens is that the Tokugawa shogunate has zero interest in trading with the West, or at least zero, like nearly zero. There's, I think, one city they allow trade with, and basically what happens is that the Tokugawa shogunate just kicks anything Western out. It doesn't allow its own people to travel outside Japan. It either kicks out or kills all the Christian missionaries. And basically what happens is for the next 220 years, Japan is going to be shut off from the entire world. Now, that's not to say that it doesn't develop. As you can see there, we got some bullets. Like, the economy expands, farm output grows, it gets its first cities for the first time. So really, like, not being in contact with the world was okay for Japan for a very, very long time. Now, spoiler alert, they're going to get a very, very rude awakening from a guy by the name of Commodore Matthew Perry, but that's for another time. So, come up with an 8-word summary of Japan's response to Western pressure. Okay, what did the Tokugawa shogunate do? All right. Once you've done that, how we're going to end is we're going to look back at our notes at the very, very bottom, and you're going to finish that right-hand box. So you either picked China or Japan at the beginning of this lesson, and now I just want you to summarize what happened with the West after imperialism. So kind of the second half. Again, be specific and detailed. Please don't forget, you're going to be turning in notes on today's Canvas lesson. So, oh yes, and one last thing. Good idea, because we got our crash course thing coming up here soon. This is a little good metacognitive activity to help you with your crash course project. So again, good things to think about, right? So hope this helps. I'll see you guys in the next lesson, and bye-bye.